Welcome back to the Blackletter podcast. We set out to create an entertaining and exciting podcast about law and business, and I think we've done it. Blackletter, the name, comes from the Gothic typeset that was originally used in the Gutenberg press. Over time, Blackletter became the only font that English law books were printed in. Everything else was printed in regular type. It made it harder for kind of the common person to understand what the English law books said. Blackletter came to represent something that was law, that was set in stone, that was a sort of old and a well-settled fundamental principle of law. We're here to demystify Blackletter law. We're here to demystify things that happen in business and law and where those two meet. And I hope you have fun listening. Hi, welcome to another episode of the Blackletter podcast. Thanks for joining us. Today with me, I have John Panichella and Royce Warrick. John is the president and CEO of Solenis, and Royce is the senior vice president and general counsel of Solenis. Is that right?
That's right.
That's right. So you got the titles and the names right. Solenis is a chemical company that's particularly involved in making water clean for industry. I'll let John talk a little bit about that, and we'll talk about intellectual property, protecting IP, strategies around that, and well, anything else we can get into with some very famous and fancy CEOs and GCs today. Thanks, guys, for joining us. So, John, why don't you tell us a little bit about Solenis?
Yeah.
And solution genesis, I guess, is the genesis of the name. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the idea. So thanks for having us today. And so Salinas Today is a $3 billion specialty chemical company. We do business in 120 countries and have over 5,000 employees around the world.
Wow.
We're focused in water-intensive industries. So those are biorefining, refining, packaging, tissue, industries that use a lot of water in the products that they consume. And so we provide solutions in these industries. Our solutions generally help those customers use water, energy, raw materials more efficiently, more effectively. We help them with sustainability. As an example, like say you were making a packaging product, something that might be what Amazon would ship to your home if you bought something on the internet.
The little happy boxes.
A little happy box, okay. So we work with that packaging producer, which is a very water-intensive industry, to treat the water influent to that plant so they can use it in their process.
Okay.
Then we allow them with our chemistries to use that water to make paper. And then the effluent from that plant we treat so they can discharge it back to a river or a stream. But even more importantly, we help them reuse the water. So we try to close up the system as much as possible so they can reuse it. And we do that with our technical people that we call our salespeople. They're all either chemists or chemical engineers. We have like 1,300 of them deployed around the world working with customers.
So is it a challenge to find a salesperson who's a chemical engineer? Because I know patent attorneys who are salespeople are a challenge in our industry, but I imagine that's a unique person.
Yeah,
you have 1,300 of them.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to find a technical person that enjoys selling. It's really not natural for them. But because we sell a solution, it's an engineered approach. Usually you find that people kind of gravitate more to the solution end and they're comfortable selling a solution to a customer.
Okay. So around this solution, I understand you guys have a number of patents, and I was chatting with Royce before the show a little bit. So tell me a little bit about your patent portfolio. I understand your strategy's changed recently. So in the industry, there are different ways to protect intellectual property. And one of them is to kind of construct what they call the pickets, right? Picket fence, where you file in every country and spend millions and millions of dollars on filing fees and protection. But recently, a lot of companies globally have kind of pulled back from that expensive approach and have done a more considered and targeted approach. And we're talking about that's kind of something you guys are moving into.
That's right. And so our patent portfolio is evolving as the company evolves and as the company's strategy changes. And the way we think about our patent portfolio, it really is that the business strategy needs to be out front as opposed to the patent strategy. So the patent strategy has got to follow where the business is going. And really in the past, and I think this probably was a vestige of our former company, we tended to, from a patent perspective, patent everywhere, which can be very expensive. And so we have stepped back from that, and we're looking more strategically at how we're going to file, where we're going to file, and it really does have to track the business strategy. So for instance, right now we're at about 20% of revenue that's represented by the patented portfolio. And a lot of that, the number was
Is that
actually,
licensing or?
no, just in terms of patents that
Oh,
we've actually
okay.
filed. And so, and that number is kind of dragged down
Really?
by the fact that a lot of the patents are on technologies that are not so differentiated and areas where the company is beginning to focus in a different way, where we're more focused on more profitable technologies.
Gotcha.
Those technologies are where we're actually looking to do more of the patent filing, recognizing that at Solenis, the patent filing strategy is not a numbers game. Nobody at Solenis gets points or accolades for the number of patents filed. It really does have to track strategically to where the business is going. And then there are different ways to protect IP, but I'm sure we'll get into that as well. Not just patents.
So tell me a little bit about how you approach infringers or how you approach protecting your intellectual property. I understand we file patents. Everybody files patents, and there's this shotgun approach: file as many as you can, and hopefully you'll capture stuff. And there's defensive and offensive patent filings. But what do you guys do when it comes to somebody taking your IP, or you notice, or has that happened?
We do take the offense, and yes, it's happened, and if you're in business, then it's going to happen. And you're going to get infringers of your trademarks and also your patents. And it's important that you defend them. And so we do. And usually the defense is kind of progressive. You'll send out the cease and desist letter, which actually works sometimes. Just recently, we had a situation where we sent out a letter last week, and we got a response, which was quick from the
Trademark
person.
Or patent?
It was trademark. And we got a response. So sometimes the basics actually work. And so we take that tact.
Sort of surprising.
That is surprising sometimes, but there are certain circumstances where the soft approach is not going to work. We don't, and with any decision that you make with respect to using official forums like litigation, there's got to be a business case for that. And the business case is the potential value that's being compromised for the business, and also the cost of the litigation, and not just outside counsel costs, but also the internal time and distraction costs for the organization. But another factor that we consider is, what needs to be understood by the market in terms of Solenis's position on defending its intellectual property. So in certain circumstances, we have had to file offensively.
Right.
And we've done that because of the landscape and what was going on in the marketplace.
So if I were to kind of dig a little bit into that was a lot to unpack, but I think that's really vital. As a general counsel of a big $3 billion chemical company, every single piece of litigation, you're not going to even launch a $50,000 litigation for no business case reason. It's got to have an external business value and an internal business value, I guess. Is that right? They have to...
Yeah, it
has to make financial sense.
Cost benefit, and the benefits can be dollars, but it also can be the statement to the market about your fortitude in protecting your intellectual property. And the costs are, obviously the legal costs, but also the internal costs, because you can't, conduct litigation without employees being involved. And if the employees are involved in litigation, then they're not doing what we ultimately have paid them to do, which is to make money and to generate value for customers. And so that benefit, that balance has got to be there before you affirmatively take on litigation.
And so what process do you go through when you select outside counsel? Do you have a kind of, here's a roster of outside counsel we use, or in each case, do you go through an RFP process? How do you select outside counsel?
It varies, but in terms of the actual selection process, it really is. I mean, table stakes would be the expertise, obviously, but it's also the philosophy of collaboration with the firm, and also how they engage with us from a business perspective. Because for Solenis, I mean, John was talking about our solutions approach to actually driving solutions for customers. And so internally, Salinas Legal is charged with doing that, we need outside counsel who thinks the same way. And if they're not helping us come up with solutions that we can pass on internally to our business folks to solve a customer's problem, then they're not for us. And so that's critically important to us, as well as diversity. And diversity is, we think it's a competitive advantage, including inclusion. And so that factors into the selection of outside counsel as well, because again, we need diverse thinking in terms of bringing solutions to bear. And we need outside counsel that can help us do that. So diversity and inclusion actually matters too.
So do you guys use a wide range of outside counsel, or do you have a couple go-to shops that you go to over and over again? I mean, so I know that there are a lot of companies that for years and years and years, they'll say, we use Cooley or we use Mofo, and that's who they go to first, and then they figure out who they're going to use by going to that firm. But do you actually manage that kind of individualized selection process yourself, or do you rely on outside counsel to find the next tier of outside counsel? Because I know that's something our listeners are interested in as attorneys and other GC or corporate counsel who do the same thing you do.
Well, ultimately, the decision is with Salinas Legal because we have to deliver service to the company. And so who we partner with is it's a critical strategic activity that we engage in. So we'll take help from just about anybody, right?
Gotcha.
And so there are firms, and we also have a partnership with a company called Advanced Law that helps us to think through and provide potential options for outside counsel. But ultimately, the decision is with Salinas Legal. And there are certain areas where we do work exclusively with a specific firm. So for IP, for instance, we have outsourced globally IP to a firm called LK Global. And so that model is working for us in an area where, we're a global company. And how can we think more strategically?
Right.
Again, about managing the patent portfolio and make it cost effective. And the model that we've put in place with them is actually working. There are other go-to firms that we have in certain areas, but we have a process for evaluating firms for the matter at hand.
Gotcha. So case-by-case basis to some degree.
Yeah.
So when it comes to, I'll touch on a subject for both of you guys. How do you feel about protecting IP in China or doing business in China? I mean, obviously, set aside the coronavirus thing for now. It's something that our employees in China are staying home. We can only have 2 attorneys in the office at a time. That's a law, apparently, in Beijing, where we have our work. But outside of that stuff, we had to mention it because it's happening. How do you guys feel about China? How do you feel about spending money there to protect IP, for example?
We have 3 manufacturing plants and quite a few employees in China. Our plants are running even through the coronavirus. But
investors heard that, right?
But we did a lot of benchmarking of other chemical companies. We just built a big plant in South China.
Okay, Shenzhen
or just over the bridge from Hong Kong. We did a bunch of things there to look at how to segment employees. No copiers in the plants, no zip drives. All those seems kind of trivial, but those are the kind of things where intellectual property leaves. And so we think we protect the technology we have there by doing those kinds of things. But it's an interesting question because culturally, what you would think infringes on intellectual property, they don't always see it the same way.
Right.
And, it's not like you really have to spend a lot of time with employees there to really have it make sense to them because it doesn't have the same meaning as it has to you or me.
You were talking about physical protection measures you take, so no zip drives, and you have some. So that's kind of a way to implement a version of trade secret protection, I guess. What do you guys do on the kind of official side, the registration side? Do you have a relationship with a firm in China? Do you file patents there? Do you have a firm? Is that part of your global strategy?
It is. It is. So again, we have one firm that handles matters globally, and there are local affiliates or firms with whom they have relationships that help to secure the infrastructure.
Okay.
And so we do file in
So you directly
China.
strategically, and then
Yes.
this firm executes on your strategic direction.
That's right. I mean, and they have operations outside of the U.S. in certain countries. But to the extent they do not, they have the relationships, and the infrastructure is a part of their infrastructure. They manage those relationships for us. So directly, they are accountable to Solenis for the delivery of service for IP. And so that's the way that model works.
So do they manage your patents and trademarks? Or
Both.
just both? Okay.
Both, yeah.
And do you
So we manage them, but they help.
Right,
They help us.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
they help us with that management process.
So weird question about, maybe not weird, but so a lot of companies say, well, what's I'm a chemical company, like your company or a biotech company. Is my brand important? Do I have to spend money and effort in, filing Madrid Protocol or national applications or protecting my brand outside of the country? What's the approach you guys take to that, or what are your thoughts on that?
We do that. And it is important to us, as with any company and their brand. And so we take affirmative steps to make sure that we're protecting that as well.
So do you file and do you guys have a registration for your mark in every country that you do business, or is it more strategic?
It is more strategic, and we're taking the same approach that we have with patents.
Okay.
Because you can, you can structure your strategy in a way that gives you this same or similar level of protection within your risk tolerance by filing in fewer places.
Right.
And so we're actively looking at that as well. There may be some, and again, this is an evolving process. There may be some trademarks, for instance, that have just been around for a really long time. And so we have to question, well, if we're not selling that product or much of that product, do we really need to pay for trademarks and renew in that country where we can still protect it, but we don't necessarily have to pay for that protection directly? And so
interesting. So
that's the way
common
we're
law
thinking
rights,
about it. Yeah,
that kind
that's
of thing.
exactly right.
Okay,
Yeah.
That makes sense. I know that some companies are challenged in like China. If you file first, even if somebody else is using it before you, your rights are superior there. So you have this patchwork of countries. But I assume that's something you do in conjunction with the outsourced legal help. They
That's
kind
right.
of give you so that's a neat. So, and what's that called again? LK?
Okay.
LK Global.
LK Global.
Going back on, Royce talked about how we've changed kind of to really focus on the patents we want to protect.
Right.
Well, it kind of started with we had to change how we thought about the whole process. So historically, this company would try to patent a lot of almost everything. And a lot of the innovation was inside out instead of outside in, meaning scientists would be working on things that they thought were clever and they would patent them. So when we got here, what we decided to do is use a different concept. It was a concept that I had used for the last 20 years that a consultant teaches. It's called new product blueprinting.
Okay.
And it's a way to understand unmet customer need. And we trained all our people, the scientists as well, in how to do this, with the idea being, if you go to a customer today and you ask them, what do you want? They generally tell you they want what they're already buying because they'd like to buy it cheaper or whatever. That's probably not the place you want to go invest your money. So this concept of new product blueprinting is about how you interview the market and customers. And it's a process that you go in and you determine the unmet need. We don't spend any money today on R&D without going through the new product blueprinting process, because then we're pretty sure that if we create the solution, it'll be patentable and we'll want to protect it because it'll be valuable.
Gotcha. So you're meeting two. So one requirement of a patent is that it's novel, right? That it's new, that it's useful, and that it's not obvious. And so the new product blueprinting process, a business process, is in parallel to the basic requirements for a patent. That's what it sounds like.
And the patent team is involved in what we call the stage gate process.
Right.
So they're there step by step, with the technical and market teams, figuring out, what's unique, how do we think about it. But it really has changed the game for us, and it's changed how we think about patenting the technologies, because now we're trying to create novel ideas by not asking customers what they want, by trying to understand what are the problems that they have that we can create a solution for.
So let me ask you a question that maybe is a little little challenging, not challenging. So that's the strategy as I understand it, which totally get this strategy is you are patenting and protecting things that are business valuable, and you're only spending money on patents in business valuable spaces. Now, there is also a school of thought that you patent as much as you can so that you have defensive patents. Strategy is popular with IBM or some of the big telecos. So have you guys ever thought, and I understand when you came here, it was neither. It was like, if we've got something neat, it's kind of like the 3M, like if you have something neat, submit it and we'll file provisional. We'll put a cover sheet on it. We'll get some protection around something that might be worth something someday and figure out where we can go. And that's expensive. Again, but what about the defensive side? Do you do any of that or have you?
We do, but again, that is driven by the business strategy. But it's also, we don't again sort of ring fence it.
Okay.
We look at specific competitors and where they are and what they're, because we can see, you can see the landscape,
right.
You can see their patent landscape.
Yep.
And so we're looking at where they are and how does that match up with where we are and where we want to be and what we want to do and the magnitude of, growth in the business that we want to facilitate. And so we will look at specific competitors, but we don't sort of do an against the wall sort of throw it up there and
right.
protect everything approach. It really is still strategic because that's just the way we drive the business, and it's got to be tied to a customer need.
So you'll do some defensive patenting as well, is I guess what I'm driving at.
It's not a lot.
But it's not a lot. It's not a lot, but we look at it, and it's an opportunity for us to be actively engaged in that process. And where the opportunities present, then, again, it's all about the business case and balancing cost benefit as to whether or not we actually want to patent. But we have our eye on it, yeah.
So something that I think is sort of interesting, looking at your industry or what your company does is so specific. And I'm not saying there are few, but there are larger and fewer consumers of your product than, say, like a Google or an AT&T or a Huawei or something like that. So you're in a kind of different mode from an IP protection perspective, right? Who are you protecting your IP from? In other words, who are the people that you would be in dispute with in your industry versus not specific companies necessarily, but the type of potential infringer?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. If you bought a coffee this morning, right, that Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts cup that you bought has a plastic liner in it. It's not recyclable or compostable. Most people don't understand that. They think they're buying a paper cup and it's recyclable. It's not. We developed a technology and we're commercial with it now in Europe. This would be for like ice cream containers,
yeah.
Okay, same kind of cup, or coffee cups, hot, cold beverage, to replace that plastic liner with a water-soluble polymer. Makes it compostable and recyclable. Now, it's a big market, so some of our customers actually have their own technologies
right.
that they're trying to solve this problem with.
So Starbucks could be a competitor.
Not likely Starbucks, okay, but the person making the packaging, okay? So the person making the cup for Starbucks, okay, could be our competitor because they want to have their own unique solution. So our customers sometimes can compete, as well as other specialty chemical companies could compete in that kind of space.
So there's a little bit of a trend towards vertical integration in a lot of these consumer product companies, I think. So in other words, Starbucks has somebody who makes their plastic or their cup, and that cup company has somebody who makes their plastic. But we've seen these really big companies as they become mega, like Amazon's one I can think of, that starts acquiring all of the, upstream and downstream parts of their industry so that they're fully vertically integrated. Is that a threat to you guys? Is that part of or not really?
Not really, no.
Okay.
So, I guess there's two things going on as I see it in the corporate world. Most companies that, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, U.S. Steel, big, they were in 10 different businesses. The focus is changing to a more focused business that you understand the customers, you understand the market, and you can really get your team focused on that. So, back to your question on vertical integration, Starbucks, they're in the coffee business, right? They're going to go have the customer experience be what they really think about. They are not really that interested in vertically integrating into the paper that makes the cup.
Gotcha. Because there's not a lot of value
for them.
Like GE started deintegrating, I guess, is one of the famous cases of deintegration. So big question for you guys, and taking up a lot of your morning with mics and cameras and time. I appreciate all the time. But what are the three most important things? I guess I'll start with Royce. What are the three most important things as GC, as a general counsel, that you would say to either another general counsel or your outside counsel that they should know about you and how you operate as a general counsel?
Again, I guess I go back to just the focus on Solenis as a company and our focus on customers. And our sole purpose is to, solve somebody's problems. And so our commercial team and the rest of the company are focused on solving customer problems that manifest in different ways, sometimes more directly or sometimes more indirectly than maybe somebody on the front lines like the commercial team. But the mindset has got to be the same at the level of support organizations like legal. And again, so we're partnering to help our internal customers and clients focus on solving problems for our external customers, and in the process, protecting our assets because we do have shareholders to whom we have a responsibility, and so that's important to us as well. But for me, it's make sure that the business strategy leads. Whether it's IP or any other strategy, it's got to be the business strategy and not the other way around. And so it's just that simple.
So if I could summarize it, and then you can correct me, it sounds like the first thing, and probably good advice for any interface with a company as an outside counsel, is that you have to understand what the company's mission is, and then you as an outside counsel have to align with the company's mission before anything else. It's not solving a legal problem, it's solving the company's problem.
Yes, and in order to do that, you have to know the company. And you need to know the people. And so connecting with the people in a very personal way and understanding our business challenges and our priorities for the year. We talk with our outside counsel about that so that they understand it, because we need them aligned with where we're going. And so I need a partner who understands that and is on board with that. And so that
understands what you make, who your customers are.
And where we're going tomorrow.
Yep.
Where we are today and where we're going tomorrow, what's important to us.
And so for right now, for you as GC, it's business case leads everything you do.
That's right. And it's up to us as a legal department and a legal function to make sure that outside counsel understands that as we're, solving issues and solving problems and helping to make money. Maybe even becoming a profit center, in terms of monetizing IP. But we haven't gotten into that. We probably don't have time for that. But
I can talk to you about it, though. We do some of that.
Okay.
We know how to do that very well. So, John, what about you? What, as the CEO and president of the company, and you travel a lot, 120 countries, and you have all this stuff going on. What's the most important thing that you would say to either your GC, who's right here, in terms of what they should think about as a GC generally, and you can make it more generic, or to somebody else who's in a position like yours? Like, what do you think you would say to them and say, well, this is what I think the most important thing is about running our company, the single most important thing, or the two most important things?
Well, when I think about running the company, and I could talk about, how Royce and I maybe work together, but I think about running the company, I try to do two or three things. We really are trying to create the right culture here.
Right.
Because if you have the right culture, then, your employees are engaged. They're really helping you drive what you want to drive. So creating the right employee experience is important to us. So we've built a culture. We talk about it. It's about people, performance, and results.
Okay.
And we drive that culture through our employee survey. And we tell people, hey, look, you may be in 120 countries. We'd like to come have a sit-down session with you on a regular basis, but we can't do that. So use the employee survey to give us feedback. And then whether it's the legal team or the finance team, then they can take that feedback and go try to make your experience better. So working on the company culture is important to us. And then working conversely on the customer experience. Right? How do we make sure our customer has the right experience from us every time? Okay, so I work on that a lot. Employee experience, customer experience. And then, what I try to do with our functions, whether it's legal or finance or HR, is align them to the business strategy, right? Because you really can't have a function that doesn't align.
Right.
And so we really work hard on alignment to make sure that, if we're going to spend $50 million a year on technology development, that our IP strategy is aligned to the business priorities, as an example.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So talk to me a little bit about how you two work together as a kind of the top of the company and dealing with legal and the business case. And obviously you understand the business case, but how do you guys work
I'll
together?
start with, what we have is we have an executive committee.
Okay.
So it really involves, we have two business presidents. We have Royce and we have the CFO and the leader of HR. And we meet on a monthly basis. And whether it's sometimes not so nice issues to have to deal with,
Right.
or how we're going to invest and grow and where we're going to spend our money. And, so we meet as a team once a month and talk about that. And that's kind of how we lead the company, is with an executive committee.
Okay. And what is that, an informal meetings? You guys
No,
do
we're
it
here
in a
in
conference
person.
room? So
Yeah, we're here in person.
Okay.
Mostly.
With the
And it's formal. Yeah.
so a formal business meeting?
Yeah, and it's usually like a half a day, and we have a variety of topics. Like I said, sometimes they're good topics, sometimes they're not so good topics.
Right.
That we have to go deal with, and that's what we try to do. Is it gives you a perspective, right? Because everybody's got a perspective, and it usually allows you to end up with the right answer.
Excellent. Is there anything else you guys would like to say to the podcast listening audience that you'd like to share about your company, or anything that I've left off?
One of the things we're really focused on is, to grow a business, you have to think about, like, what's your strategy? Ours is to kind of think about these market trends.
Right.
So, things are happening fast. Like, you would not have thought, like, 3 years ago that sustainability was going to change the business environment, but it's going to. It already is. There now are funds that can only invest in sustainable companies. And so young people are changing the world in a much faster way than ever happened before, because of social media, because communication channels, because of all this stuff. So we're really focused on how do we tell our sustainability story. And, we have two ways to address that. One is, are we a good corporate citizen? Do we do the right thing in the communities where we operate? And we do. The second thing would be, do we do the right thing with our facilities? Air emissions, water emissions, those kind of things. But most importantly, it's what we do for our customers, because these customers have big facilities that consume a huge amount of energy, water, resources, and our ability to help them change their CO2 footprint, drive a more sustainable solution, is really important to them. And they are selecting suppliers. Investment funds are selecting where they'll invest, all on this concept of sustainability, I think driven by young people. They actually read, the what's in a product, make their decisions on what they'll buy by what's in a product.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to have a really profound impact on business.
So that's one of your corporate core values, it sounds like, is that you're driving sustainability for your customers, because that's your customers' need.
Yes.
Is they need to be sustainable as well, because that's just how the world is trending. Fantastic. Well, thank you both very much for joining us today. Thank you, viewing audience, for joining us on this episode of the Blackletter podcast. Download us wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes and Google Play. And we'll see you on the next episode of the podcast. Thanks. Take care. That's all for today's episode of Blackletter. Thanks again for listening. Join us next time when we talk about more Blackletter issues in creative ways. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and Google Play so you never miss an episode. And to catch us on video, check out our website at blackletterstudios.com.